Jeff Fuller back with you. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, Jay Fuller Interviews on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find us wherever. And now the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can certainly find these interviews there. And I believe people's stories make our stories much better if we will just make the time and take the time to listen to other people's stories so we can unlearn what we thought was right to relearn what is right. And one with a tremendous story is Kathryn Carroll Gordon. Kathryn, welcome in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, so I just want to jump in with behind me, there's a quote from the book Relationship Grit. Grit, I understand, stands for something. But when you were thinking about writing this book, were you all into writing a book, or were you did it take some convincing for you to do so?
Well, it's funny how it happened. Of course, if you know my husband, John Gordon, he is an author. And so he has written like 23 books. But our kids, my youngest had just went off to college, and I was actually looking to write a book with someone else. It was a woman. It was going to be a lifestyle book. And somewhere along the way, I kept getting blocks. And then I would turn and talk to John about things. And then the more we started talking, I realized and he realized that we really need to be writing a book about relationships is what it boiled down to. And that's how it came about. So it wasn't really planned. It was really, I feel like something God wanted us to write. So yeah.
And this book is certainly vulnerable. It's honest. For you, did you have any reservations about being this honest? Like, what if my family reads this? What if somebody finds out? How did you work through that process?
No, I absolutely didn't have a problem with it. I am an open book. So anybody who really knows me knows that I share my story. I share my past. I share my failings. That's just who I am. Now, with my husband, it was a little different because, here he is now, is this very successful author, and people know him more or as the positive guy that, leadership and all these great things. And so it was really something that we had to talk about because it was exposing who he was. But, a lot of times, people can hold on to that and not see it for what it was. So we had to be very thoughtful in the way that we shared our information so that people could see that there was truly a transformation that happened. Yeah. So it wasn't so much about me. I don't really mind as much as my husband. So, yeah.
And on Instagram, it's Kathryn Gordon, and that's KATHRYN Gordon. So on Instagram, Kathryn Gordon. Could you just share a little bit about where you grew up?
I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I was a Navy brat. So I lived all up and down the East Coast and went to 5 different elementary schools from Maine to Jacksonville, Florida, before we landed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I stayed there through middle school and high school and then college.
Did you have any siblings?
I have 2 older brothers. Yes.
What was that like being the younger sibling with 2 older brothers, as you just mentioned?
Well, it made me very tough. Let's just say that. Because there was a lot of fist fighting. There was a lot of fighting. And, growing up in a Navy family, my father was never really home. He was a naval aviator. And so it really fell upon my mom. And truth be told, she just wasn't a very good disciplinarian. And I mean, we were wild. So, there was a lot of fighting. Yeah. But we had each other's backs.
And now, being a mother yourself, what have you learned from how you were raised, whether through trial and error, just to incorporate with bringing your kids up the best way when maybe you didn't receive the best examples when you were younger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did grow up in an alcoholic home with 2 alcoholic parents. And when my dad was home, it could be a very violent place to be. Um, I always felt love from my father. I mean, I was the apple of his eye. So, and he was much more um, vocal about, sharing his love. My mom, I guess you could say she's an immigrant, if you could say that, from Newfoundland, and had a seventh grade education, and, um, just was very much like, straight and narrow,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
didn't really share her love that much. Yeah. So it was a hard way to grow up. And so with my children, my goal was always to let them know that they were loved and that they felt safe.
I love in the book, and the name of the book is Relationship Grit, how it comes out that you are more fun loving. You don't mind if there's some dishes in the sink for a little bit, just to have those experiences. When you think back to your childhood, do you remember being hugged? Do you remember somebody filling in those gaps, or was that something you were always longing for, and perhaps why you're such a great mother now?
So sorry about that.
That's fine.
Um, so yes, from my mom, I did not get a lot of, like physical touch or compliments. From my dad, I did, but funny enough, when I graduated from college, I moved away from Virginia Beach 2 weeks after I graduated. I really had to get out of there. And I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, which was 900 miles away. And then my mom would start sending me care packages with letters that she loved me. So, it was just really hard for her to show her love back then. But I always did know I was loved, as crazy as my household could be at times. My mother always kept a very clean home. She always cooked. So it wasn't your typical, when I say typical, alcoholic
Yeah.
home where, the house was a wreck and the bills weren't paid. No, both of my parents were very functional alcoholics. And so from the outside, we looked like your normal middle class family. And, so I did feel the love, but it wasn't but I would make her say it. But it was when I moved away that she started sending those kind of letters. Yeah.
So, if you would just share a few stories of when John first wanted to date you. And again, this is the famous John Gordon, your husband, and we'll talk about what that means or has been like as well. But when he first asked you out, well, just finish that story.
Yeah. So he is 3 years older than me. And so when I met him, I was a, young, successful woman in Atlanta. I had my own apartment, it was fully furnished. And I met this young guy who was standing out in front of a bar trying to get people to come into his bar that he just bought. And so, number one, I was not interested at all at anybody that owned a bar. And number two, he just seemed, young. And so I kind of blew him off that night. And then a week later, I was at this event called the Best of Atlanta. And I'm standing there, and I love to eat, I love sweets and stuff. So I was eating this cheesecake, and he came up to me and he's like, "You remember me?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And he's like, "I need to get your number. I never want to let you go again," or something like that. And I'm like, "Okay." So I give him my number really just to get rid of him. And he called and he called and he called. And I kept blowing him off. And so, back in the day, do you remember when you would click over and someone was on the other line?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he called me one time. I was on the phone with a friend and he called and asked me out again. And I said no. And he said, "Look, if you don't go out with me tonight, you don't get to go out with me." And honestly, Jeff, there was something about that where I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And so I clicked over and I told my girlfriend what he said. And she's like, oh my gosh, you have to go out with him. And so I did go out with him that night. I did not put on any makeup. I did not get dressed up. I didn't do anything. I made no effort. And I went and met him. And I still didn't like him. And so, yeah, I still didn't like him. I went to Amelia Island that weekend to vacation with some girlfriends. And I had like a list of guys that I was dating. And I was going through the list saying, I want to simplify my life. And I was eliminating guys. And John wasn't even on the list. And I was dating like a lot of, I guess what you'd say famous people.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. But so I don't even eliminate John because he's not on there. But when I went back home, for some reason, I picked up the phone and I called John. And he came over that night, and we've literally been together ever since. It's such a God thing.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about, after John became successful, it meant that you had to go through some personal sacrifice to really help him with that. Was that difficult for you to help him, or did you just feel like the ends justified the means for that time?
Really at the time, he wasn't that successful. It was when we really first started. I'm so sorry. Can you see that when it's popping up?
No.
Okay.
You're good.
So, he wasn't that successful and we weren't married yet, but we were both kind of movers and shakers in Atlanta, meaning I was, doing a lot of charity type work and involved in all of these different organizations. And so was John. And he had actually started a organization called the Phoenix Organization, which is an organization that raised money for children's charities. And so he thought the things he was doing was important. I thought the things I was doing was important. But I also was an actress and a model. And so I was also at a point in my life where I thought, do I want to pack it up and move to LA and try to make this a go, or what do I want to do? And that was when I realized, first of all, I didn't want to put that much energy into it, and I probably there were a lot of people that were better than me. Let's just say that. And I knew that. And it was a lot of fun at the time, but it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue. And there was just one pivotal time when we were both, it was like a power struggle of which of our events was more important. And it was right then that I knew I had to make a decision. And so because it was all of these thought processes of what needs to happen, I was okay with it. Like I knew it was the right thing for me to do to get behind him. Yeah.
So my daughter is 17, and of course I'm her dad, so I think she's stunning. I'll send you a picture after. She's a junior in high school, just went to prom with some friends. And so the idea of being a model, what was that process like for you? What would you tell young girls about going in or pursuing that direction?
Well, I'm sure it's a lot different now than when I was doing it. And I will tell you, there were some really seedy people out there. I mean, there were definitely some situations that photographers that ended up taking pictures that my agent was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
So, I think if that's something your daughter wants to do, you should definitely be involved with her. The good thing is now a lot of it is online, meaning even if you're auditioning for commercials, it used to be that we'd have to go to whatever location and audition. And now you send in tapes. So it does make it a lot easier in that way. So I don't know what it's like now. I know way back when I was doing it, which was like 25 years ago, really, you had to have a headshot. You had to, there were certain things you had to do and, have a reel, and that would show, some of your clips. So I don't really know how to do it now, but except in terms of if she wants to do it, make sure you're involved. That would be.
Now, do you wish there was social media back when you were starting out, or are you kind of glad there was no social media?
Thank goodness there was no social media. I was pretty wild. I was definitely pretty wild. And hopefully no one has that on record.
Well, the name of the book is Relationship Grit. You wrote with your husband, John Gordon. And we just want to bring up this website again. Just you can find it wherever books are sold, but also go to johngordon.com and just find the book there as well. But Kathryn, as we think about what you've been through, I think resilience is a great word, like grit. How important is it that people learn to be resilient when they're younger versus when they get older?
Well, life is all about trials and errors. I was just thinking about this. So, um, we started a t-shirt company it's called Positive Brands, but the t-shirts say stay positive, positive warrior. And along with that, we created a cookie called the Positive Cookie. And we worked with this, chef and to come up with the recipe. I mean, it was like we put so much energy and money into this. And we didn't know what we were doing.
Hmm.
We didn't know what we were doing. And it pretty much went bust. Now, we still have the t-shirt company, meaning we don't do it through Positive Brands. We broker it through a t-shirt warehouse. So we still have the Positive. But my point with that, and the reason I'm bringing that up is I just thought about this. I'm glad we did that. We did that, and it really taught John and I both about what our strengths were. And what John realized is that he doesn't need to be dabbling in cookies, right?
Yeah.
After that, he realized that what the big request and what was being needed in the workforce was leadership conferences and leadership training. And so he ended up going completely that side and opening up a whole new avenue that way. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to stay in my lane. And right now it's writing the book, and I'm going to start a podcast of my own. And so it's that resilience. I could have, I could be, we could be beating ourselves up about the money we lost and the time we wasted and how could we not know? But instead, we look at that and go, what a great lesson, an expensive lesson.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. But, it's that kind of resilience and then pulling it together to help you go into the right direction.
Yeah, that's so good. And as a pastor, there's two books, Tempered Resilience by Todd Bolsinger, that I've just grown to love, and it's difficult to apply, but also Sam Chan's book, Leadership Pain. And it talks about how everybody wants to grow, but whenever there's change, there's pain. So if you really want to grow, you have to learn from that pain that you've been in. Yeah. And with that segue of being a pastor, with this podcast, I try not to bring it up too much, but you've mentioned God a few times. Mm-hmm. How important is faith to you?
It's everything. Faith to me is what has carried me my whole life, even before there was any kind of organization in that, if you know what I mean. I mean, I can remember being 5 years old praying to God, and that wasn't anything that was really taught to me. My father was raised Catholic and was an altar boy and was really kind of forced into doing a lot of things in the Catholic, and going to Catholic school. And I guess he had been abused by the nun, and so he had kind of a bad taste in his mouth about organized religion. And so he never really exposed us to that, and neither did my mom. And so for me, it was just a personal thing. I mean, I can remember being 5 years old, and there was one, kind of violent incident with my parents, and I can remember being in just kneeling down in the bathroom saying, okay, God, you put me in the wrong family. You got to take me back home. I mean, I can remember that as vivid. And then this feeling of just calm that came over me. And so I always prayed to God. And funny enough, John and I, that was really how we connected. So remember, I told you that, I really wasn't very interested in him. And when I called him that night to come over and visit, we stayed up all night talking about God.
Yeah.
We didn't make out or any, I mean,
Right.
just,
Right.
we talked about God, and that was our connection. And, fast forward, I can't remember if I put this part in the book. I don't think I did. But so with my breast implant story, my breast implants were killing me, and I didn't know what was going on. I was so sick. Everybody kept telling me I had postpartum depression. It was all these
Right.
things. And back then, the doctors were writing prescriptions for OxyContin like it was candy.
Right.
But intuitively, I really knew that I should not take any of this medication, that there was something wrong with me and I need to figure it out. Well, unfortunately, it wore me down. I just got so sick that I couldn't lift my head anymore. And, at the time, unfortunately, I do say this in the book, my husband was not supporting me. And that's
Right.
because
Right.
every time I would go to the doctor, they would tell me nothing's wrong with me. Right. And so one night I prayed to God, and I just prayed that he please forgive me for what I was going to do in the morning. I was going to take my life. I was going to take all these I had several prescription bottles of
Yeah.
OxyContin and end my life. And I went to bed that night, and Jeff, and I've had this happen to me several times in my life, but there was a voice that was as loud as in my dreams, as loud as anything I've ever heard. And it said, "Your implants are making you sick.
Hmm.
You need to get them out." I woke up in the morning. I rolled over and I told John what I had experienced, and he looked at me, and it was like the aha moment. He goes,
Right.
"I believe you. I will
Wow.
second mortgage our home to get my wife back." And so it was that message again, that was God. And so, God is just a big part of my life. And then my husband, who was Jewish, by the way, uh, discovered Jesus. And when that happened, John has taught me more about Jesus and the stories of the Bible than I ever learned
Hmm.
growing up. And so now we are, followers of Jesus, of
Yeah.
course. And, if you've read any of his books, there's always things weaved in there. Some are more obvious than
Right.
others. But yeah, so that's why the G is the
Right.
first letter, and how that acronym came about, because without God, we're nothing. And, I also want to share with you that, I don't know how far you got in the book, but, at one point in our relationship, when early on, when we were first married, John had a couple, how do I say this? They were infidelities, meaning
Right.
it didn't go all the way, but there was some very heavy flirting, and his attention was going in, not in the direction of his wife, which it should have. And I didn't know anything about it. And fast forward, John becomes a Christian, and that was like 2007. And then all of a sudden, and this had all happened, I think, like in 2000. So 2007, he becomes a
Right.
Christian. About 2010, we're walking on the beach, and John just blurts out, "I have something to tell you." Now, I would have never known anything about this, Jeff.
Right.
Okay. And he's like, "I just keep feeling like it's the one thing that's, holding us. And I just want to share with you." Of course, that threw me into like a full blown midlife crisis, and all of that. And that's a part of the book as well. But he never gave up trying. I really, really tried to leave him. I tried to cheat on him, and God would never let it happen. I mean, I have funny stories. We're not going to go into it. It would just never happen. It was the craziest thing. And but he was relentless in saving our marriage at that point. And I've asked him, like, "Why would you even tell me that?" And he's just
Yeah.
like, "I just felt like so." But anyway, he was on a plane, and he never talks to people on a plane, but he ended up talking to this guy next to him and telling him how distraught he was. And the guy said, well, I have a family prayer, a prayer that me and my wife say, which gave John the idea. And so he came up with this prayer, and I'll share it with you.
Right.
And it is, God, we invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us, so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. And that prayer he would say to me every single night. Even if he was traveling, he would pick up the phone and call me and say it. And Jeff, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I would just sit in silence. But he would say it every day. And then all of a sudden, I realized that I was starting to remember the words, and I would kind of say it in my head while he was saying it. And then it was one point that he was home and he was laying next to me. We're getting ready to go to sleep, and he says the prayer again, that I actually reached out and grabbed his hand and said the prayer with him. And that was the night that I forgave him. Yeah.
What a special story, and a story of God's grace, but also John's humility and gentleness. And it takes time to restore. And that's why I do love the title of the book, Relationship Grit. And I do believe that it begins with respect for one another, good relationships, but then you need to build that trust. And on Audible, that's where I've been listening to your book this morning. And I just certainly enjoy the vulnerability, but I'm learning that vulnerability without accountability is somewhat lacking. How have you invited accountability into your relationship now, but also because you are so successful, just that you continue to keep your eyes on God as you progress and gain more and more influence?
Yeah. That's a good question. One of the things that John really wanted to do that he felt was very important was for us to have a covenant with God. And so that was one of the things that we did, was we decided we had this covenant. It wasn't just a agreement or, a marriage, contract with each other, but a covenant with God. And we both, have things that we do. John was traveling all the time, and so he always he had things in place, like, no, you get a lot of people that reach out to him, hey, I love your book, The Energy Bus, can we meet for coffee? And he just he does not meet with women privately, one-on-one. There are just rules that he has come up with for himself, and then me as that I have come up for myself as well. But we're all human. But I do have to say, when he became a follower of Christ, he just is a changed man in so many ways, so
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we still have to have trust, and we love each other. And so you have to really think about that. What do you want from the relationship? And the grass isn't greener, and now in hindsight, we could look back and go, wow, we went through that, and it has made us so much stronger.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really good. Excellent. Kathryn Gordon, making some time. Instagram, it's at Kathryn Gordon. The name of the book we're referencing a lot is Relationship Grit. But Kathryn, you're involved in a lot of things, and a lot of people look to you now and just find your experience, but your advice so valuable. Do you ever have to pinch yourself thinking about how you grew up, where you grew up, and just knowing that now you have a platform just to speak words of life and truth into people?
Wow. No, actually, I never thought about it like that. No, I am so grateful. Wow. I am grateful that I've been given this opportunity. And I think maybe it's because I've worked so hard to get, it wasn't like a overnight thing
Yeah.
that, I am where I am. There will be because there were a lot of struggles and a lot of learning. And so my goal is, and this is a prayer with God, is that, please use me and allow me to share my story and share my platform to help others.
Hmm.
And so that's one of my daily prayers. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I like that. And it's a constant reminder that, no one's an overnight success. What's the expression? It takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
That's exactly right.
And then somebody has said that the best leaders are too busy learning that they don't realize everybody that's following them. They're just trying to become better. Kathryn, I have to ask, with all of John's books, what is the story that he has used that was your idea, but he never gave you the credit for?
Oh, that's so funny you say that. So it's a running joke, actually.
Okay.
Because when I met John, my favorite number was 11. And so everything I referenced was 11. And so when he wrote the energy bus and it's bus number 11, I have to sometimes remind him, like, don't forget. Don't forget that I'm the one that reminded you of the 11, and
Right.
so just funny things like that. But there's really nothing that I would say he doesn't give me credit. He probably gives me credit for more than I deserve. But yeah. We have our little Jack. Poor John, in our family, he's like, between our two children and me, he's always catching it.
But that at least my wife and my kids tell me that keeps me honest and humble. So it's good for us all.
That's
and
right.
Kathryn Gordon, joining us now, is not on Twitter. So if you want to make a fake Kathryn Gordon account that's believable, just include the number 11. 11, maybe that will get some hits or take off. Kathryn, we thank you so much for your time. A couple of questions, then we'll get you out. You reference in your book some of those health concerns that you had. How difficult is it for people to process life when there is a health concern that is kind of a distraction at best and debilitating at worst?
Well, what do you mean by that in terms of how to navigate your day to day?
Yeah, because when you reference having young children or just having a child and you were in so much pain and the doctors didn't have answers, how did, in this current climate of our culture of so much mental health issues, how did you get yourself out of bed and just be motivated to keep pressing on during those times?
Mm-hmm. One is that I knew I had to for my child after I got my implants out. But something that's always been I've been very passionate about, and I still am, is health. Meaning, even when I was at my sickest, I wanted to make sure that I was eating the right foods, that I was taking care of myself. And so I would say anybody that's going through a health crisis, put yourself first. And I don't say that in a selfish way, but make your health a priority, make your healing a priority. And I know that's really hard when somebody has children and
Right.
a house to take care of. And so, of course, the second thing would be that hopefully the people in your life would be there to support you and help you in that healing. There's a season for everything,
Right.
right? There's a season for everything. So, this is your season. Yeah.
So we are, I am a big Tom Brady fan, and the thought of avocado ice cream does not sound appealing. Now, someone did say that drinking aloe vera juice extract pulp is healthy. So I've been trying to drink that. What is a healthy food that you make yourself take that you don't necessarily enjoy the texture or the flavor of?
So first of all, Jeff, I've got some great news for you.
Okay.
And I've been giving this to my children since they were teeny tiny. There is a product called George's aloe vera water.
Okay.
And it does the same thing as that yucky, bitter, jellious thing that you're trying to eat. All you do, it's George's aloe vera water. You can even order it on Amazon. It tastes like water. I put it in the fridge and you drink about this much. I always gave it to my children when their stomachs were upset or they were sick. It's a great thing to kind of coat your stomach. I recommend it to so many people, and everybody always calls me and says, "Oh my goodness, this was a game changer." So that's my advice for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with me, I do mix things up a lot. I'm not very consistent. I'm not very consistent in my life in general, which I wish I was. But so my supplements I mix up, the things I eat for breakfast, but I was big into keto at one point. I have to say, for me, I don't think that's a good idea. All the animal fat, I love a good steak, but it just wasn't agreeing with my system. So I think it's about paying attention to your own system. But something I do daily would be vitamin B's. When I say B, vitamin B12, resveratrol. I take a multi, but not all the time. Yeah, those would be like the standards. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I want to go to this quote behind me. To have great relationships, you cannot act like you are two separate teams. You must invest time and energy to become one team who supports and encourages each other. Can you just unpack that for me? Because it seems as though we live very selfishly, even within marriages. And sometimes it's good to define roles, but at times that is not always participating on the same team. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah. Think about it. How many times do we give our attention to our work relationships, our children, which is obvious, even our friendships, and then our most intimate relationship comes last. We almost kind of expect that they're just going to be there. And so my thing is twist that and make your spouse your number one priority. So I always like to tell this story. When I was raising my children, there was one day in particular, I'm standing in the kitchen. I've still got my nightgown on. My hair's disheveled. I was half asleep. The kids had missed the bus. I'm trying to make lunches, for them for school. Was going to have to drive them to school. And in comes John Gordon sauntering into the kitchen with this very handsome suit. He's got his rollaway, and he's going to be taken out to the airport and going to some company who they all just want to hear him speak, right? And I got to tell you, Jeff, I had this pang of jealousy that went through me, and I wanted to look at him. I wanted to cut him down so bad. But at that moment, something said to me, give him a compliment. Wow. And I turned around and I said, John Gordon, you look so handsome in that suit. And oh my goodness, his eyes lit up. I mean, I could tell like he needed to hear that. And he needed to hear that from me. Right. And so that was the day I realized that he needed to hear the best things about himself from me. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to do to make our relationship a priority.
So good. Last question, I'll get you out. It's a two-part question. The first part I stole from the Be Contagious podcast by Hernando Planos, basketball coach that I know and love, great guy. But if, or I guess in your case, when the feature film comes out about your life, who plays you in that feature film?
Oh, Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to think of it. It depends on what age, what stage, and what age.
Well, while you think, I'll just tell you mine. And
Okay.
so for me, because we look so much alike, I would say Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets to play
Yeah,
Jeff Fuller in that feature film. But what
I
say you?
love that. I love that. Gosh, I'm so not up on the latest actors. Oh, geez, can you pick one for me?
I'll go to the second part to the question then. Who plays your love interest, or who plays John Gordon in that feature film about your life?
Keanu Reeves.
All right, there you go. There you go. Kathryn, thank you so much for making the time. Certainly a pleasure. And sincerely, I've enjoyed the book, Relationship Grit, tremendously. Your honesty, your vulnerability. For real, it makes complete sense why you guys are successful, because you bear it all so people can learn and just be grateful that we have a story to tell. So thank you, Kathryn.
Jeff, I want to just add that we do have a free action plan that kind of walks through the book and asks certain questions and things for you and your partner to do together. And that's relationship, I hope I'm saying it right, relationshipgritbook.com. You can go to relationshipgritbook.com and the action plan is there.
I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. And Kathryn, thanks again for making the time today.
Thank you, Jeff.
And again, that's Kathryn Gordon. Make some time. You can find the book Relationship Grit. We're going to have what she just referenced in the show notes. And we thank you so much for being a part of Jay Fuller Interviews. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And now the Backfire Podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks all. We'll talk again soon.